Alright. Walking with intent. Social distancing from Courbet's painting, and I'm thinking of working that into something that might do that sort of thing. These blokes are socially distanced from 1998. Very careful.
1998?
1998, they're carefully transferring a calculator. Because back in those days, a calculator was a novelty item. Another example here of, dare I say, social distancing. That one I think is from about 1997 or something. Oh, actually it might even be earlier, 1980s. They were ahead of their time, I think. Usually there's a double page for each painting there. I'm just sort of trying to evolve an idea. And titles. They tend to appear, and then luckily when you need a title there's often a choice of a few titles. It's a bit of a weirdo there. And I've just got here, which is where I've got to now, that there might be some sort of map to do with this one about numbers. Figures and numbers are very current on the screen at the moment, don't they? We've all got to know percentages and things like that, when really nobody knows. So here's a number. I quite like that one. Not a bad face, is it? An older figure surrounded by a cloud of nanobots, and hidden in the mountains are various a confusion of weasels, which of course are the politicians in Canberra.
Oh, yeah.
But the reason I'm drawing attention to this is that, of course, it is a version of Caspar David Friedrich's figure, but painted from the other way, looking at him.
Standing on the mountain top.
Looking out there. And his walking stick isn't broken, but this one is, because Scott Morrison vowed to beat the electricity companies with a big stick.
At the time.
And he broke his walking stick, which is most unfortunate.
So that image started off as one of these large wall drawings.
That's what happens. And that's like this mother and daughter, even though Nick's, our daughter, is having a baby. What do you call it? Masaccio painting, there it is. And there is a bigger version of it somewhere, but it's a tricky thing painting a mother and child, whereas if you've got a Masaccio sitting there, Mustachio, you can play around with that and evolve. And there's a lot of detail. This little detail here, I don't know whether you can see that, of the sky. There's something particular about the colour, which I've translated up to the back corner up here, because it's sort of an ominous thing. So even just that little detail there comes sort of directly from seeing that unnerving little bit of detail.
What was it again? Where is it?
There it is up there where the aeroplane or drone, it's probably a little aeroplane carrying Donald Trump. Well, that one actually came directly after the bushfires. So that's the sort of ash state of the bushfires. And there were some more over here that came during the fire. In fact, those angry ones were at the time of the fires when people were extremely grumpy about how politicians were handling the fires. And then this one just unfolded so quickly because we had the ash, and before we knew it we had floods, and then before we knew it we had abundance of green, and then we had the coronavirus. So this most recent piece is just depicting the sort of black and whiteness, starkness of the coronavirus and how we all have to be alert. So paring it back to almost black and white is an interesting sort of thing to do. That's an interesting idea because these drawings that I'm doing now are all on paper. This is how to get from A to B, and I think of them as road maps, so they all just sort of hold up like a road map, even the big ones, because after all I think I've left art and I now make road maps, and I'm thinking of becoming an activist on paper, and then I did a couple over some old ones. When the fire was on, there was a fairly short version, oh there's another one over there, of the fire, with the sun was that incredible colour. It's sort of just such a memorable image, isn't it? Because everybody's incredible colour. The memorable thing from that time, of course, is the wind and the smoke and not knowing which direction the fire was coming from. You could hear it, but you couldn't see it. So there was just this constant, which way is the wind blowing, where is the fire?
Eyes in the back of your head, yeah.
And so that led to that one.
Anxious disconnection.
And then right in the middle of the fires there was a horrible interview with the police chief in Sydney about strip searching at music festivals, underage 15-year-old kids being strip searched right in the middle of the fires. And this peculiar image sort of combined surveillance, police, strip searching, while all that was happening. I mean, it's just peculiar, isn't it, that sort of thing happens. It's like with the coronavirus, there are all sorts of peculiar things happening at the same time. And trying to keep track of, you know, the politicians and what's happening while these major events are happening is very peculiar. So then there were a few fairly direct sort of depictions, as it were, of moments of the fire. And then it started to get back to introducing elements that provided a narrative.
Is that where it comes from mostly, the news and, you know, what's world events, global events?
Oh yeah, well today.
Today.
You know, you woke up, things are happening. Then you go into the studio and they're in the head. And they get turned into some sort of storyline about the day, in a sense, don't they? Sometimes if you're lucky it's more of a fantasy, and sometimes if you're not so lucky it's a direct depiction of horror.
Because they're horrible times.
Like, for example,
so here are these angry
the indecisive nature of the politicians at that time provided a lot of very angry people, and I'd never painted an angry person before, and it's quite interesting to work with mouths in particular and eyes, but I mean they're not very pleasant images, but that's what happened at the time, isn't it, really? So pillars of establishment started to show cracks.
Houses on fire.
Houses on fire, the military was brought in, wildlife desecrated, and in the meantime that was a pretty nice spin bowl by some cricketer at the time while drinking a glass of 4X.
Cricket. Yeah.
I quite like the success of the snake. I've never painted a snake coming directly at me before like that. And I quite like those challenges. The news or events happen and you make work about that. But the other one is the assumption of pictorial elements or formality, which is a big part of my work. But I also, because I had such a good grounding in that sort of thing through, dare I say, Jeff Wilson in Adelaide,
Formalism.
formalism is something I just take for granted, but the elements, the way they work, the structure of the painting to lead your eye around and so on, what happens. And so bits like this, I got quite sidetracked into depicting the side of that mountain through his trousers, even though it's a pretty far-fetched notion that his trousers would form that sort of thing. But it's amazing how it takes your eye. If you focus on the mountain behind him, it all makes complete sense. But if you focus on the square, it's like a Miranda, isn't it? It's a little painting from the news. There's the Scott Morrison holding up a piece of coal. There's the drones, surveillance, and so.
Is that a bomb he's standing on? Yep.
Well, he's about to push that bomb over the cliff accidentally while he's being photographed for the newspaper.
Oh, right, with his lump of coal.
And it's interesting how they're always dressed in a grey suit with a blue tie, and I thought I'd put him in a Taliban outfit just to see what he looked like. And of course he's exactly the same person. He's still holding the coal, got the drone, about to drop a bomb, and he's the same person. But he's got a thought bubble up here too. I painted that transparent bubble on the top of his head just to formally to make the bridge between the two there. It gets a bit lost, but I quite enjoyed the transparency of the thought bubble popping up top of his head.
You're a bit obsessed with cliffside paths,
Cliffside
aren't you?
pithy paths.
People meeting on cliffside paths.
There's a couple more there, I think.
People exchanging things. They've got another television or a toaster there, is it?
It's a technological implement.
Oh,
But
right.
it's interesting here, they both got them.
Oh, yeah.
Because which one of those is carrying that item? Oh, it's got to be this bloke because his hand is on the handle, isn't it?
Well, that drawing goes back to when? 80. When's that one with the cliffside path?
98.
98. Then
Yeah, they're quite
this
old.
one's
And this one's 2019.
19. So it looks like a stamp with the two on the... and then it's got a few more computer icons going on. It's got its
Yeah, well,
forward and backwards.
I remember the other day. I quite like these slides because people always have a logo or something on their T-shirt or uniform. Could be a Malevich, of course, couldn't it?
The black square.
The black square. And then this is quite good because we're so used to just pressing that and getting on with the next one.
Are they trees or are they craters or?
Well, that might be just logging. I think that's an old forest, isn't it?
And he can't breathe anymore, so he's got to have
A breathing
a
apparatus.
breathing apparatus. And he's surrounded by...
But that's prior to adding all the little symbols and motifs that
He
almost
ended up-
locked him out.
He ended up getting pretty
I
surrounded.
just decided to use all of them up and take it to the point where you're just barraged, so that almost all those little symbols are like atoms, or you're surrounded constantly by all these
They're like nanobots or something, swarming of...
information. To be conscious of life on Earth and where it's going fore and aft, isn't it, for your kids' sake? And just out of interest. There was a distinct lack of colour when the last election appeared and the Liberals appeared to get in, and there were some very nasty looking Liberals up in the night sky. And then it led on to, although no, actually I was just going to say about the the way they work, most of these works are sequential, and they've always been a bit like comics, but you can take an individual one or groups of them, and they're really just a narrative of time, aren't they, of now, going forward. There's lots of those.
Put them out.
Put them out. But they're quite like the repetitive nature of some of them. There's that funny one there. And there's a detail, but I won't go with that. Yeah. Words. And this on.
On
Isn't
what?
it? Well, it's on now.
Everything's on.
But it's very hard to switch it off.
Too
Isn't it?
right.
Because
Keeps being on.
the description, and this button here, it seems to be veering off to the left. So even though it's on, it's veering off, which does tend to happen.
Yes.
It's somebody standing in front of one of Gina Reinhardt's coal mines, I think. You see it's a driveway going down into the centre of the area.
Right.
But I quite like it turning into a mirror. And often they go square just so you can put them on Instagram. One soldier looking at himself in the mirror
All right.
and suddenly realising that he's pointing the gun at himself, which is a little bit silly. It's an instrument for writing novels where it writes the novel, all you do is rotate the resource material. And I did find although I don't think you ever find a witty lobbyist there protesting. You're more likely to find inertia and a lot of people talking knowingly and taking up information like sponges. But I think I prefer current dreaming of the sublime. Lately, there's an opportunity for
Audacity.
audacity. That's right. But who knows? We don't want to envision torment